Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you are here in YouTube and you would like to be part of the conversation, you have to travel through the different gates. Click on the button down below. You can get into Zoom, register there, join Zoom. You'll find the link to Makana. That's where we all are actually asking questions and chatting. Now, if you think you can answer some of those questions as opposed to ask them, then what you need to do is get here early. We open the doors at 6. 6 to 6:40 is really a time for us to just hang out and talk. But we also do a lot of tech. So if you're trying to tech out your microphone, and figure out if you're ready for the panel, that's a great time to come in and be part of the conversation. At 6:40, we start our mic checks between 6:40 and 6:45. Once we start the mic checks, generally that's as big as the panel is going to get. Now, Saturday's a little different. We're going to change a couple times. So we'll have the educators coming in right before 8, and we're going to have a great conversation. We have Ron Reed here from South by Southwest EDU, which I'm really excited to have. So Ron's going to be answering questions and talking about South by Southwest's approach to education. So that's in the second hour, but we'll have the educators jump on right before he starts. Then we'll do another mic check once again at 9 o'clock. 9 o'clock is when Andy Carluccio is going to be joining us and starting a 5-weekend course on Zoom OSC, which really allows Zoom to kind of be taken to the next level. So Andy's going to join us at 9. We'll do a mic check and then we'll get going. So it's going to be a longish day. So we'll go until 11 o'clock. But we've done this before. We understand the piece there. So anyway, a reminder that this show is completely run by all of you. So this is not something that we have to actually, we need you to ask questions. There's not a lot of questions right now. It'll be a really short show. We'll go into education early if we don't get more questions here. So the good time to throw those questions in, think about things that you're trying to figure out in virtual production or media production, and go ahead and put them into Makana, and we'll start asking them. So without further ado, Bill, why don't you take it away?
Thank you. Let's talk questions today. David Brady from New York is our first submission. Yesterday's session was very enlightening. We were talking about lighting. What are some general guidelines for background lighting to create depth and separation from a subject?
Go ahead, DJ.
So I can give a little bit of an example here. If I turn off the lights that I have for me and get rid of this thing over here, you will see that now my shirt tends to really blend in with the background. It's a dark gray shirt against a dark gray background. So when I add lights in that light my shirt, and now you can see that I've got light on the top of my shirt. My background actually has light on it. So changing the tonal value of the background to make me stand out from it is really the key when you're trying to separate your background from your subject. And you can do that either with lighting or have a background that is a different color that contrasts with your subject.
Bill?
What TJ says, and basically this comes from a theory called 3-point lighting, which is kind of where people start when they get into learning lighting. And it is basically you want a key light, and the key light is the main subject light that profiles your face. Now, you don't want it straight on because that looks like a driver's license photo. So most of the time that's off axis and usually a little high, but that's your primary light. The second light is a fill light, which takes the short side. And me, that would be this side, which is slightly darker than my key side. And then the third light in 3-point lighting is some kind of back or rim light that helps separate the subject you're photographing from the background, whatever that is. Now, are these, figuring out the ratio of these 3 lights is very dependent on what you're trying to do. If you have a dark background and somebody is in a dark shirt, as I am, if I had that backlight off, I would be completely faded in and you would see nothing but a floating head. So that separation of the scene, whether you do it through background lighting, a rim light, or something, becomes much more important than it would be if you were, say, outside and someone was wearing normal clothes in sunlight. So that 3-point lighting is the start. A lot of people don't think it's the best look in the world, and a lot of people are kind of moving to more modern lighting looks. But if you understand that, you know the basics of what we're trying to do: shape a person's face and separate them from the background so that you pay attention to the person you're looking at.
Go ahead, Lane.
And also, if you have too much Like in this temporary setup that I am right now, I moved everything to my real studio. I've just turned down this big light that's showing up to the back, and because the room is so small, now I've over flooded the back, and now I'm totally toned down, and there's like there's no coloration. So in my case, I'm better off to turn off that light and have the background a little bit too dark, and I went and put a lighter color shirt. So that 3-point, like Bill just said, I think it's the basic of everything, but sometimes you have to play with the rules a little bit. In my case, I don't have any backlight right now just because of the way my studio is set up, so it's not proper. But yeah,
one of the things when we're lighting backgrounds for shows or interviews or whatever, we're usually trying to have the background, for the most part, be 1 or 2 stops below the foreground, so that the foreground, so that our subject sticks out in those areas. And then it's a matter of looking for things that are large pools of darkness or large pools of flatness. How do we bring dimension back out in the background? So there's less of a set of rules and more of you're looking for things of, does that look kind of flat back there? If we added just one little light over here or one little bounce over there, is that going to pull a little bit of that dimension behind them out? And that's something that I find to be useful. At least with the DPs that I work with. I can't say that I'm the DP usually. I'm just watching them and cribbing notes. Anyway, next question.
Moving on to John Pruitt of Huntersville and here in the panel. And John this morning says, makeup. In the pre-show, Matify powder was mentioned. Is that a brand or type of powder?
It's not a powder. It's not a brand. It's made by MAC. It's called Matify. It's hard to find. You have to go to a MAC store to get it typically. So I don't know. We get it in bulk on our end. We buy them, I think, by 10 or 100 or something like that. But it's a little tube, and I usually have one laying around here, but for some reason I don't today. I think I took it and put it in my bag. It basically, what Matify does is it acts like a powder, but powder I find to be bothersome. It gets on a lot of things and everything else, and so it's a gel. But it's MAC Matify, and there's other ones that are similar to it. We just haven't used any other ones for the last decade or two. So, but what it does is just you put it on mostly your forehead, nose, tops of the cheeks, chin. If you hit those areas, it'll take out most of your. It's something that men can wear without it being looking like makeup. It just basically dulls down all your highlights, so it's a really easy way to kind of flatten someone's highlights out really quickly and easily, almost anywhere. Bill?
Yeah, I wanted to support exactly what Alex's last point was. Often, particularly men, but it happens with everybody, you get a little perspiry and a light that's pointed at you will have a huge kind of glow on one part of your face, depending on where the light's positioned. So anything that will diffuse light will be helpful in making you look less hot spotty. So powder, I've had makeup people who, when I've done something on camera, just say, oh, you're fine normally, you've got some good color, but I'm just going to throw some powder on in case you're here for a long time and you start perspiring a little bit. It'll help you look normal over a long time. Makeup doesn't necessarily have to fix problems. Sometimes it's just to get you back to something that doesn't look odd.
Next question.
Moving on to Ari from LTV. Tel Aviv. It's TLV. I completely misread that. Sorry. I have a question related to the Zoom OSC training at 1900. Will there be another invite sent out for that?
Not today. So if you're in this meeting, you just have to come back to this meeting at I'm assuming that's the 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time on our end. Will be 1900 at your time. It's the same meeting today, first one. Then after that, we're going to have, we'll switch over, starting the next week, we'll have separate meetings for Zoom OSC, and that's because Andy needs other permissions than what we have here in the webinar to run Zoom OSC. So we want to do the first one this way, just so we kind of get everybody into the collect and before we switch gears. But there'll be another one that goes out next week. Next question.
TJ Asher of Minneapolis, and here on the panel, which version of Zoom OSC do we need for later today?
Andy, so the first thing that's going to happen is that Andy's going to give us kind of a tour today, so you won't need anything. This is really going to be Q&A and tour and just kind of walking through everything. Then Andy's going to give you a place that you can register so that you can get the pro version of Zoom OSC for free for all of February. So during the training, you'll be able to use Zoom OSC, the pro version of it, for that. So it's pretty exciting. And so I would take advantage of that this month to see if it's something that you might need in the future or even next month. But yeah, you won't need anything. And then Andy's going to put some stuff out. He's prepping it right now, but he's going to put some stuff out for all of you to play with between now and next week. So the homework really comes after this one. This is kind of the introductory class to kind of get everybody off the ground. Next question.
TJ's back with another one from Minneapolis for Chris Fritche. Please explain the new setup. Chris?
Where's Chris?
Oh, yeah, I wasn't doing a lot of green screen for work, so we started doing some practical set stuff, and we just wanted to change it up a bit. And the last couple of videos I had put out at work, it was the, all white background, I'm a Mac, you're a PC type thing. And I just don't want every video to look exactly the same. So for the next few, we're just going to do a dark background. And so the wall is painted gray now, and I got a couple more gallons of green if we want to paint it later, but it's going to be gray for a while, and I'm going to do a practical setup like a vlogger setup for a while.
That's great. Yeah, green screen is fun. I've done a lot of it, but it can be a little bit constraining as well because you end up in a situation where you have the limitations of green, and what can key well and everything else. And so I know that after many years of doing green screen, I've tended to lean back towards more physical. Go ahead, Bill.
Well, I just think it's interesting. So we were talking about lighting a minute ago. The fact that Chris has what looks to us like a purple background, but he was just explaining he's got a neutral gray. If you use neutral gray and you control the spill light in your environment, you have the option to put intense color light back there and have it work. See, he just turned on a white light. His background is really white. That idea of controlling spill light. Background's gray. You're right. Yeah. It's neutral. So that idea of controlling spill light into your scene is what allows you to put a colored light on and have it read as truly colored.
Yep. Next question.
Moving on to Greg Yotes from Gridley, Kansas. And Greg says, what impact on remote productions will Starlink internet make for everyone?
I think it's going to make some of our jobs easier. I have a leaning that I think that it will not work well for this kind of conversation, but we'll see. I feel like latency and jitter is going to be very high in a mesh-based satellite network. So my calculation is that real-time two-way communication is not what Starlink will be great at. I also have concerns that once everybody's using it, the capacity of the system will be limited, but we'll see. That said, the idea that you could even get 5 or 10 megs a second anywhere in the world, pretty exciting. I'm very excited about the process of being able to get something out of anywhere in the world all the time. But I'll be curious to see what kind of performance we actually get. Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, I've been reading up on it and watching a couple of videos on YouTube, and I've seen latency ranging from 20 milliseconds to 100 milliseconds. So there's a lot of variability there. I'm sure it's location determined by your location as well.
Right. And the variability is what worries me. It's that it'll change a lot in real time, and that will generally lead to breaking up. So that's the thing that I'm, kind of watching carefully. Now, next question.
Rick Combs of Columbia, Tennessee has our next question. Can I stop a YouTube stream after a 90-minute stream and then restart it 15 minutes later? I know there's processing time. Does anyone know what those times are?
So once you stop a YouTube stream, it's done. So it's, that's the end of that stream. You can start it. You can start a new stream 15 minutes later. You can start as many streams as you want at the same time. So YouTube is, flexible, but you can stop sending something to the YouTube stream and it will theoretically just wait for you to do something. But you can't actually go into the interface and say stop and expect it to start back up again. As far as processing goes, that can take up to 4 hours. Well, it can take longer depending on the length of your video for it to be fully transcoded, but it should be playable immediately if you have DVR set up. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
To add to that, if you're using anything like StreamYard or Restream or anything like that, if you disconnect the stream at the source, it will stop the YouTube stream altogether. But if you're going through YouTube, you should be able to stop the stream at the source, and then it'll wait for you, like Alex said, up to 4 hours.
Next question.
Moving on to Jesse Mills from the panel in San Francisco Bay Area. Oh, this is an EDU question, but it's not an EDU day, but
Well, no, it is. Well, we're going to go ahead and do the EDU questions because we're going to have this one specifically. That's because we're talking. We have Ron Reed coming in a second hour. So go ahead, ask the question.
okay. Yeah, let's dive into it. Looking for e-learning platforms and trying to understand all the MOOCs, LMSs, VODs, ILT options. Is there something out there that offers a high level of interactivity, CEU tracking, and high quality AV? Looking at Coursera now.
Anyone have any strong opinions about LMS or? Yeah, go ahead, John.
Well, there's the alphabet soup. There are so many different ones there, like Canvas, courseware, and the MOOCs area. One that I like a lot is a group called the CN. But I guess that's more of a question to you. It's how are you going to market it? What are they using? Are you going to try to offer your own courses, or are you just trying to provide this to some sort of institution?
Yeah, this would be building courses from scratch.
And is it building courses for a larger organization or for yourself?
It's for a larger organization that also regularly does CEUs and, which means continuing education units.
Mm-hmm.
So, some of the folks attending would be psychologists and people in the medical industry and things like that. Yeah.
I tend to think of building the best of breed. So there's a thing called Credly that deals with badges and can do CEUs. You might even want to associate with an institution of higher ed. When I taught at Monterey, we used to give university credit and CEUs to organizations, and universities are in the business of controlling credit and CEUs. There's a lot of them out there, and everyone has their favorite. Of course, there's open source like Moodle, and Moodle has plugins that you can connect with it.
Cool. Could you put a couple
Roscoe,
of those in the
probably
chat?
Have some opinions.
Could you put a couple of those in the Mukana chat, John?
Yeah, I'll start
Thanks. Appreciate you.
linking those.
I have to admit, after working in Africa, I have deep scars that were mostly scraped off of me with Moodle. So I just every time I hear the word, I twitch. Anyway, TJ and then Roscoe.
Could we get a definition from some of the word salad things like CEU and ILT and whatnot?
CEU, continuing education units, ILP, an individualized learning plan, LMS, learning management system, sometimes course management system, MOOCs, massive online. Help me out.
I think
Roscoe.
it's massive open. I think it's massive
open online course.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. We went around the block and came back to Canvas. So we've been through, Blackboard and 3 or 4 others. So it's hard to say, but just so you know, in my university, it's called extended education, are the people you want to talk to if you're going to offer a course. I don't know what it's called with you, John. Is it extended ed?
Yeah, extended ed.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to admit, I don't like any of them. I really, probably the best course I ever created was using Adobe Acrobat as a book and doing links in and out of that to what I needed. So they could link to resources. They could link to my group that was doing the badging.
You don't like them because they're missing something or they're doing something poorly, or what do you mean by that?
Not reliable.
Course management systems were designed primarily to help faculty put their syllabuses and their calendars online and have a common Dropbox to put things in and pick up files. If you look at it from the student perspective, what you're trying to do if you're managing a course is reducing friction for them to get the content that they need and be able to interact with other students. That's particularly why I like this called the CN. They have a course management tool in it with a calendar and a Dropbox, but it has a little bit of a LinkedIn style, a little bit of a Facebook style, and a course management all in one platform. So they could chat, they could do their e-portfolio, you could close the class. And another one, there's a guy called CogDog called DS106. It's called Digital Storytelling 106, which is there's a course on a campus, but since digital storytelling needs to have a broader audience, there's a public view of it. So if you look at the digital storytelling, it has assignments, it has discussions. And what I like about that is it's extremely interactive. So for me, course management systems don't encourage student interaction. And that's, I think, where the most learning happens. Roscoe, I see you smiling. So add your 2 points.
Well, we've been through too many changes, so it's thrown out productivity. So that's I mean, I'm gone to Dropbox. So my students have access to their own Dropbox folder, which I put they flip the classroom. They get to look at everything at the beginning of the semester if they want.
One that's probably, I don't know if it would be manageable to move it for something other than it's really designed for K through 12. But my cousin actually has an LMS called Exploros, which is pretty great. And it's really designed, though, again, for K through 12. And we're going to try to bring him on to have him talk about it. But it's got a lot of more modern tools built into it. So again, it's really designed through, I think, K through 12, but it could be something that might be customizable to handle a bunch of this stuff.
Thanks so much.
Yep, absolutely. Next question.
Well, it's right back to Jesse Mills, who has the next highest rated question in our list. And he's hosting his first remembrance/funeral ceremony online. Any advice to help create a meaningful, honorable, and connective ceremony? The platform is going to likely be Zoom.
Yeah, go ahead, TJ.
I guess I would, for remembrance ceremony, people are probably going to be talking about the individual to celebrate their life. And being able to hear those people talk is going to be your key thing. If you have the ability to connect with them ahead of time to work through any potential audio issues they may have, that will go a long way to making it a memorable and compelling event.
You may have a lot of people that want to speak, but definitely to what TJ said, I would pick the 4 or 5 family members and the minister and have them make sure that they're well mic'd, like that, even a pile, but
Exactly.
just making sure that they have something, anybody that is it's going to be meaningful for them, having them be able to do that. I think will be important. Go ahead, Chris, and then Jeffrey, and then Roscoe.
Yeah, I did one of these early on, I want to say last May or something. And I made sure to buy a couple of the Rode wireless goes. I got 3 or 4 of them. And anybody I knew who was going to speak, I just had them mic'd separately. And on the last one, I just had it laying on the podium, kind of with the mic tape pointing up in case anybody else came up. And it was a lot better than pulling off the system audio.
And Jesse, yours is completely virtual, right?
It's completely remote. Yeah, there's 4 people in Canada, 1 on the East Coast, and those 5, will be speaking. I'm thinking about things like word clouds or opening up the chat and just things like that to where the participants, not the main speakers, can sort of participate in some way to kind of connect with how this person, impacted their life or touched their life in some way.
Right. Jeffrey?
Yeah, I've been putting some thought into this because my dad passed away back in September, excuse me. And one of the things I was thinking about is if you're doing rooms, to have private rooms and public rooms. So like family members go to their own room, so they're not disconnecting from Zoom. Rather, they're moving to another area so they can kind of work things out and then come back in.
Roscoe?
Oh, now that you described it, there is no, this is all online, all virtual, completely. Yep. Okay. Sorry. I'm going to talk about contrast ratios under the tent, but that's a different thing.
John and then Bill.
There's a site called Tribute, and it's a way of doing a collective video. So you set up the Tribute site, then it sends an email out to the people. Then they do a recording on the web through the browser. You collate and curate those videos, and then you could show them. It helps tighten the event. We did this with a good friend, and so we had all the videos ahead of time. Then we were able to put them in a sequence in an order, and then we stopped and started them, and people got to speak between it, and that helped move the event forward. We sort of, early times, close friends, colleagues, and it also for the people who participated in it, they liked that they didn't have to feel they were on the spot. They were able to record to it. If they didn't like what they said, they re-recorded it. So I think that really improved the event that we did.
Go ahead, Bill.
For me, and having gone through a few family funerals and the rest, that grief is one of the strangest emotions. People react to it so differently, and I think ministers tend to have experience with it and know what they're doing. If you don't have ministers that are connected to the family, and some families do and some don't, and you're in any kind of a hosting situation, I just think that resonance to human emotion and being aware of what's happening, I kind of like the idea of a separate place, because the family is going to be the most grieving nucleus of that. And if there are attendees who are not that close, I just think that the thing that funeral directors, in my experience, and thank heavens I haven't had to deal with a lot of them, but they're very calm and they're very practiced at moderating emotion in a discussion so that you can get the work part of this done, to get the ceremony to move along without either stepping on toes or hitting false notes. So I just be aware of that and maybe look for those resources of people who do this for a living and know how to handle that situation.
Great. Next question.
Moving on to Andrew from Warwick. Is there a simple tool or tools that would allow a relative non-technical person to bring together individual videos of musicians playing so that all the videos can be synced and appear on the screen at the same time so that it looks like they're playing together? What's the best way of doing something like this? This is something we've discussed a lot here.
We have. I don't know if we've landed on there's a couple apps that do it. But it's as far as, most people, it's the sync app. It's the ability to play a background track or a building set of tracks and there's a couple apps, and I just can't think of them off the top of my head because I haven't had to produce it. Go ahead, Beju.
Yeah, I think the most popular common one seems to be Pluralize from Red Giant. Pluralize. Sorry.
Well, no, so that'll help you sync all of those, but there are the tricky part is the artists all playing to the same track on their phone. And there is an app on the phone that gives you the record.
Acapello.
Sorry?
Acapello on the iPhone.
Acapello? Yeah, Acapella. Yeah, so what that'll do is you can listen to something and then play and record your piece of that. And then that can be compiled. And then back to what Beju was talking about, Pluralize is something that's pretty effective as far as resyncing them all. Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, it's too bad Victor's not here, since he's our resident true expert at doing this, because he plays musical multi-part things. But in my experience, the two things that are most important is tempo and key. So that's why you set up some sort of track that determines those two things. What is the tempo and what is the key the song is in, so that gets sent out to every musician. The musicians can all record their parts. And when it's aggregated back to a central zone, the editor who's going to be putting the multiplayer outline together, that everything is at least matched in those two aspects. Mm-hmm. Everything else can be kind of futzed with a little bit, but I think tempo and key are pretty important.
Next question.
Christian Ortiz from South Florida says, Alex, last weekend someone was asking about Keynote and how to set up a lower third. Is the alpha channel done by creating a fixed PNG, or is it done live? How do you avoid getting aliasing around the edges?
So, I was trying to set this up while we were going, and we'll see if I can pull this off. I guess I will say that one of my pet peeves about the ATEM Mini is that I don't think you can turn on and off the. Maybe you can. I guess the other one that I was using. Anyway, so you can do it live. So that's not an issue. Really, what you're talking about is being able to. See if I can pull this off here. Now I am trying to do this really quickly. You basically are doing a Luma key, and oh my gosh. So what I did is I very quickly built one, just to kind of tell you what I've done here, is I built one really quickly on my computer, and then my phone happens to be loaded into my little ATEM Mini here. So I built one on my computer. I saved it to iCloud. I'm opening it up on my phone. We're going to see if my phone will output a lower third for you. We'll see. Go ahead, Peter.
You're muted, Peter.
I use the chroma key, and I just selected the apple green background and then told the ATEM Mini to do it, and I can literally, I loaded up it's a PNG of the slide that I created with my lower third on it, and it keys out the green.
I highly recommend against the chroma key.
Okay.
Here's why. Is that it works okay, but you can get almost the same result from a Luma key. And the thing is, the chroma key will give you half resolution, so it'll alias any curved edges. Now you have straight edges, and so it won't work. So the Luma key is actually a better solution than the chroma key. And this is as someone who spent years doing it with the chroma key, thinking, oh, just put green behind it and I'll do it. No, because what I did. It's what I did for years, and then I realized that after a little bit of work, that I was better off with the other one. So anyway,
I appreciate. I mean, this was experimenting one day, trying to figure out could I do it even. I mean, I did.
Yep,
this was
absolutely.
like week 3 with the ATEM Mini Pro.
And I will notice that on Peter's key, the edges of the block are fade out green, and they're picking up some of the key colors.
Yeah.
So that's an imperfect key with no alpha channel kind of trying to do it.
And I am, let's see here, if I click on this.
It's a feature, not an artifact.
Well, what that just simply says is I just redo them with the alpha channel transparent and just be done with it.
I think Chris Fritche's had his hand up for a while if you need a little more
Chris.
time, Alex.
Yeah, this might sound silly, but just to clarify, the question's asking about Keynote as in a presentation or Apple Keynote?
I think it's Apple Keynote.
Yeah, it's capitalized. I think it's Apple
So
Keynote as
what
well.
you're looking at here, what you see with this is a lower third coming out of my phone from Keynote. So this is just my phone it's HDMI or Lightning to HDMI out. And it is just being keyed over. This is a Luma key. So you can still see that I can still do, and what I can do here, and you'll notice that you don't see any strong aliasing along here. You would get that with green. And you'd have a hard time separating certain colors out with green. Now, if I turn this off, this is now, I now have control over clip. So I can figure out where my clip is. I can figure out where, this is me playing with the gain. So I can play with that. And all of this is being done with clip and gain inside of a Luma key in the down. You can see if I push it too far, it starts to attack everything. But that's a semi-transparent mask without any noticeable aliasing in my text, and that's all being done without a green screen with that's just a Luma key keying it out, and it's a flat output out of an iPhone into an ATEM Mini to put that together. So and you can see I'm kind of working with. You could put out a ping, but you can definitely put out just a single output from the from Keynote as well to make that work. So anyway, that's what I was trying to kind of struggle my way to in real time. Go ahead, Chris.
Hey, have you talked about this one before, Alex? Can you go over this later at some other time? And the other question is this answering his question if he's talking about Apple Keynote? Because
it is. That's Keynote. I just did Keynote. That's what I just showed. I was doing the lower third from Keynote.
Didn't know you could do Keynote live.
That's just an output. It's just Keynote. It's just Keynote HDMI out from my phone.
I'm misunderstanding what he asked.
I mean, if you put Keynote into presentation over black, and then you just pump that presentation into the switcher, it's just you can have it do all the things. And there is, I don't know what episode, but there was a Keynote. There was some point where I showed that in detail of Keynote, and for a lot of us, for years before I got into key fill, we use Keynote for lower thirds, and you can use all the animation tools and everything else that Keynote has, but put them into lower thirds and graphics and everything else as a no cost graphics solution. It's pretty awesome, as far as what it can do. Go ahead.
Can you show the source Keynote slide that did that?
That's what I was going to ask. Is there a way you could hold up your phone just so Chris might be helped by seeing?
I got what he's saying now. I thought he was just talking about a Keynote presentation, and it's just make so it's like twice as big.
It's Keynote, and if I cut to it, that's a slide that's coming out of Keynote, and so that's the source file. But yeah, there's nothing magical about it. You can do it out of PowerPoint or anything else. It's just that Keynote's graphics tools and their animations are better than everybody else's. So as far as the layout and the structure and even just the kerning is better than everybody else's. Go ahead, Roscoe and John.
The last part of his question about aliasing. The other thing is by running the complete verticals or complete horizontals and not running at an angle, there's no pixels that have to be interpolated for
Well,
the key.
my name it has to be. So
Yep.
So that has it. So it's all there. The reason it's not aliasing is because I'm using a Luma key and not a chroma key. The chroma key is 422. The Luma key is the 4 in the 444. So if the reason that your key won't work with the reason I don't use chroma key is that you will get aliasing with chroma keying all the time because you're keying half the resolution of the image. So that's that's why you don't use chroma key for graphics, is because you'll always key unless you're getting 444 graphics, which these switchers don't support. So you will always get aliasing on curved. I can put a curved edge on this one, and just give me a second, and I'll put a curved edge. It won't alias either because it's not about that. It's about the fact that
there's no pixels being interpolated on the edge in a curve or an angle.
No, because there's interpolation there.
Right.
But it's not. Again, the aliasing is not coming from those edges. The aliasing is coming from the 422. That's the thing here.
I understand the Luma versus chroma, but I'm just anytime I can avoid an angle and go with a square.
That makes it easier.
Yeah.
But you can do. We'll see. Maybe I could prove myself wrong here. So go ahead, John. While you're talking, I'll pop it up.
Yeah, you covered this on 113, and I put a link to the chat. It's very useful.
Let's see if I'm insane.
You mean January
Mickey
13th?
Mickey has his hand up as well.
Yeah, January 113 is January 13th to me.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention, I think if you also could avoid any sort of scaling in your chain with the graphics, then you can also avoid aliasing because you're not trying to interpolate the pixels in terms of stretching up or down.
Chris, go ahead.
Hey, Alex, you said you're saving that out to your phone through iCloud. Obviously, this is possible if you just have your MacBook hooked up to the ATEM, right?
Yeah.
It
would be a lot easier to do it with. It would be a lot easier to do it with a MacBook. I've never done it with a phone before. This is the first time I've tried doing it with a phone. I happened to have a phone connected to my thing. So here, if you look at this, there's a little bit of, let me see if I can play with this.
I see aliasing.
It's a nice monocle effect you've got, Alex.
Yeah, hold on. Let me.
I see all sorts of sci-fi options.
Hold on. Let me see here. Yeah.
Does Keynote have any tracking built in?
Yeah, exactly. So there's a little bit of aliasing to and this has to do with the key though. So if I pull that back, so to Roscoe's point, there's a little bit of aliasing, but I promise it'll be twice as much aliasing.
Yes, it will.
Try going into presentation.
But if you're trying to avoid aliasing, go with square edges.
Yeah, hold on a second. Yeah, so you'll have a little bit. So Roscoe is right in this case where you'll see some aliasing on the edges there, but that's aliasing in the draw. It may be even that it's a low resolution draw. If it was, let's see if I can.
Well, yeah, and if you can work one for one, always do that. Never bring in graphics that are different size than your outgoing format.
But this is I think actually alias to the level of the resolution of Zoom. So, but if you did this would be this circle would be unusable inside of with a chroma. Yeah, because it would be half the resolution of the piece there. Go ahead, Chris, real quick, and then we'll move on.
Any idea if Blackmagic is planning on building any type of graphics into the ATEM to just do little things like this?
They have that. It's their you can load stills in, and you can load not above the ATEM Mini. You can load whole sequences in. So you have frame stores within Blackmagic to do those.
Well, I know you can do the media stuff, but there's no way to do something live. Like it's not going to have like a Keynote program built in.
Sports module.
No. I mean, I think that again, you can't do Keynote live, but you could do. I mean, to reproduce Keynote would cost more than what Blackmagic makes every year. I mean, it seems like a little thing, but it's a lot of engineering. So I don't think Apple. I don't think that Blackmagic is going to go down that path unless they buy some graphics company that's going out of business. That's what they do, right? So unless but I think that I doubt that they would dive into that anytime soon. It's really outside. Yeah, I mean, they could possibly build something. Fusion, you can build all the graphics that we're talking about in Fusion and export them out so that you could use that as an animation tool. Next question.
Alex, what's your pleasure? It's marked as EDU2. Do you want me to go ahead and just do them all in this stretch, or do you want to save?
Yeah,
any?
we'll do general questions for EDU that aren't specific to Ron's appearance later. Go ahead.
Okay, so we're going to go with this one. That's James Babbitt of San Diego saying, what are the best ways to accurately convert speech in an MP3 file to text?
Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, accurately and best, dangerous words, especially best. But yeah, most productions that I work on hire a transcription company to do the transcriptions. Very popular one that I think 80-90% of those shoots that I work on send files to is Transcription Associates.
Mm-hmm. You can also, if you want to get a fast start, there are automated tools. We had Simon Says on, which I tend to use for stuff where I just throw things into a Final Cut doc and push it out, and a couple minutes later, for a couple dollars, I get it back, and it's pretty darn accurate. Not something that I would use I would clean it up. The most accurate way to do it is always going to be a person. Go ahead, Bill. And then real quick, Bill, we gotta move fast.
Yeah, yes, transcriptions at best 99 point something percent. That means that every 100 words they're going to miss one. A 10,000 word script, that's going to be a cleanup job. Greg Gibson is next.
Roscoe's had one thing before we go.
Oh, okay.
Adobe Premiere supposedly has a really good speech to text tool, so check it out. I don't know how good it is.
Yep. Next question.
Greg Gibson of Washington, D.C. is in with, is there an easy way to use the Dugan Automix with vMixCall that doesn't require routing to an external mixer, something like the VST3 plugin?
Yeah, go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, if Greg means external mixers in a physical hardware box, none that I know of. I'd like to know if there is one. Sorry. Let me rephrase that. There is a way to get it done through another mixer or piece of software. Waves SoundGrid, you can get that done there, or sending it to Waves LV1. But those are external software mixers. So if he calls external mixers, if that includes software mixers, then no, you have to get it out somehow into something that can process it.
Next question.
Pete Hagen says, does Zoom provide better video quality for Zoom rooms versus standard Zoom client, the standard Zoom client by default?
Yes. I mean, the standard default client, I think the meeting is generally 640 by 360, I believe. I mean, if the free default version, what you're seeing here, I think if you open up your window all the way, it should be 1080. And you can obviously get HD, which would give you 720. So meetings, and Zoom is capable of providing meetings at webinar and meeting level at 1080p, but it is highly restricted because it not only would be hard on Zoom, it'd be hard on the internet. If Zoom did that, it would be there's so many people using it right now. So that resolution is restricted. And if you pay for it, if you use a Zoom room, we've talked about using portals to push everything to 720. It works well. So you can control it there. Next question.
James Babbitt of San Diego says, could you give an easy to understand definition of depth of field for a student using a microscope? Note, how would you increase the depth of field?
Go ahead, TJ.
Depth of field is the part that appears to be in focus when you're looking through something, either a lens or a microscope in this case. And I don't think microscopes have any way to increase the depth of field. That's why everything's put on a slide and meant to be flat.
Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, depth of field has to do with aperture. That's the size of the opening that allows light in. The bigger the aperture, the shallower the depth of field. So if you want a big depth of field, you use a shallow or a small aperture, and that means the camera's letting in less light. So normally you have to balance that with more gain to get an equal picture.
I mean, the challenge is that depth of field is actually a function of both. It's the aperture, your frame size, your sensor size, and your focal length. And those three things affect the depth of field. And the reason that that's particularly useful is because with a microscope, you have a very high focal length. So that is creating a very, very short depth of field, which is what's in focus. Go ahead, Roscoe.
I'm going to say, if you read about this, you'll run into a term called circles of confusion. Do not speak about it. It will cause many circles of confusion.
I mean, the way that I try to explain it to people is think about when you think about your aperture, think there's only one thing that's in focus. And then there are things that are, so there's a perfect focus and then there's falling out of focus, but it is where does it fall out of focus in relationship to the size of your sensor? When can your sensor or film see that focus fall out? You know, if you think about it as a pyramid hitting the sensor, as you make the aperture smaller, it pulls like this, and it means that as it's moving up that pyramid from being in focus to out of focus, it takes longer before it reaches a resolution that you can see it. As you open up that aperture, that opens up faster. So you want to kind of think of it that way. And so anyway, next question.
Tony Mobley in Newman, Georgia says, is there any value in using an Apple TV as an ATEM Mini source for production or education?
Every time I do a build, I use Apple TVs for that. And I love Apple TVs for it. It is the easiest way to wirelessly take your Apple devices and throw them into your Apple Mini, ATEM Mini. So, or ATEM or production pipeline. We take the Apple TVs and we literally stick them to the bottom of presentation desks. And we have sometimes 2 or 3 of them under there. So different people can pull out their iPads or iPhones and show things. And it works exceptionally well because it's built in. You just go, look at this Apple. We say, just use Apple TV 2 and they pop it up and boom, I've got a video. Obviously you can't play copyrighted material. It'll handle DHCP or HDCP. But if you're using it for screen sharing, something like a web page or whatever, it totally works. And we've used it for a decade that way. And it's super useful. Yep. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, we have one in our Sea Cliff screen studio, and it just works. And we've put the please stand by slides and things like that we don't know whether we're going to need it. And if we go to the Apple TV, it's right there.
Yeah, you can definitely have like screensavers, and you can have all kinds of other things that are just playing through there. I've been playing with the idea of having an Apple TV looking at a channel that's like a video or something that I can just always jump to. And as I'm slowly building this crazy, I'm building a 3 or 4 ME switcher. I haven't decided which with ATEM Minis. One whole ATEM Mini is like a lot or is Apple TVs. Anyway, next question.
Michael Fisk of Spokane Valley says, can we come into the room on our cams for the 9 a.m. Zoom OSC if we're not there currently?
Yes. Yeah. So we're going to do another, we are planning to do another mic check at 9 a.m. To get ready for that. And that gives everybody a little bit of a moment to take a break if they need to. And then we'll go into Zoom OSC. Next question.
Manfred Althmer on the West Covina says, what's your gut check on confirmation bias regarding equipment purchases that others hype? I'm finding people tend to pile on a new product and when it may not be right for me. Do you have an example of purchasing something you regret?
I think we all do. I have
a garage full. I have a garage full of it.
I've bought stuff where I haven't opened it I think I found something in my garage that I bought and I never opened. Yeah, it wasn't that expensive, but it was like, really? I spent $40 on this and I never even pulled it out of the box. All right, Mickey.
Yeah, one of the things like I always bear in mind is like when the Zoom H4, not even the N version, came out a while ago and people were raving about it. I was like, a recorder that's less than like $4,000 and people are liking it. And I got it, and yeah, noisy.
Go ahead, Chris.
I'd say anything that I bought cheap. And I guess around our house, the term is cheap is expensive.
Yeah. Cry once. Jeffrey.
Google Glass. But I do a lot of reviews, so I get a lot of products, and I get some products that come out before people get to them. I have one product in particular that's a video product that I'm really hoping is they're going to turn things around. A lot of people have talked about this product. I'm not going to talk about the product just yet. So, but because there's a lot of big problems, like for instance, trying to
Whoop, there he goes. We lost you, Jeffrey, if you can hear us.
That was immediate.
Go ahead, TJ.
Hopefully that wasn't the product.
Yeah, exactly.
I try not to buy anything right away, so that to allow the hype cycle to pass if possible, and see if it's still, a month or two later, is still, at the level of consciousness that other people are thinking about it, rather, spiked in popularity because everyone got for free, and then it's dropped off the face because nobody is really using it anymore.
It's one of the reasons that we kind of got away from a Mac break. We got away from reviews as much as they were recommendations of stuff that we're using all the time or using relatively often or that we already have. I've made a couple missteps in that area, probably 10, out of hundreds of shows where I said something and I was like, oh, I should have waited another 3 weeks to play with it. And or I got one that I thought worked really well and didn't work for everybody else. So headphones, sorry about that. If you bought, they worked great for me. Anyway, so I think that I'm always careful of that. Reviews make me very uncomfortable. So I tend not to review stuff as much as just recommend things that I'm already using. Go ahead, Guy, and then Bill.
Yeah, I'm curious about that phone, the red phone that you got, Alex, because I canceled mine. I got, after waiting for like 6 months, and then I was like it was like $1,600. I think I got the titanium one
I
or
still
something.
love
I was
it.
just like, cancel. Why?
I still love that phone because it takes 3D photos. It takes 3D photos and you can look at them. It was in my office. I actually was just shooting with it. It takes 3D photos and you can look at the 3D photos. And so I've been doing 3D photography, for 20 years. And so having this little phone that does it, to me is so much fun. And the videos, and the problem is you can't view them anywhere other than the phone. But I shot some stuff of snow in Washington, D.C. when it first arrived, and the snow in multiple 3D levels and everything else. I just wish other people would build more stereo things because they're kind of magical. Dom, and I'm gonna butcher his last name, but sent me. He does stereo. Hold on, let me see if I can find. Let's see. I'll go grab it and show it to you. But I love stereo anyway. So I love stereo. I don't use the phone for anything else. I just take pictures and movies with it in stereo. And I just wish a cell phone. I wish the Sony one. The only thing that would make the Sony more perfect is if they had taken all those lenses and put them on both corners, so that you could shoot stereo video with it at HD or whatever 8K. I would have been over the moon. Like to have interocular distance between the lenses. And be able to do it. And just so much fun. Anyway, so I paid for the titanium. And what happened was because they ran late, they sent me the regular one and then they sent the titanium. So I got 2 phones out of one. And so I have I kept the titanium, but Andy Anako actually has my other one. I just gave it to Andy. So he has the other one, and I love that phone. So I have no regrets over buying that phone. And I'm glad. It's one of those, I have this little collection of weird stuff that I think is like classic, like that will remember that for me anyway, so the original Mac 840 AV, Sony F950, Ozo, and it goes into one of those like just cool camera, kind of thing. Anyway, Bill and then John.
So for me, the burgeoning of the web and the fact that it's, we used to have this source curation project. You had to have some expertise to maybe get a magazine column or something like that. And then everybody was reading and vetting whether or not you were on track or off track. Now in the world of a billion voices babbling at us through the internet, curating who really understands this stuff and who doesn't is harder and harder every day, which is why trust, that's what I call source curation. Figuring out who knows about stuff and learning to trust them, which is, I hope, what we're building on office hours. As you
I realized I wasn't paying attention to time. We have to close. We have to close up. So let's go to the next question. We're gonna do kind of a power move here.
Yeah, absolutely. Laura Thompson, Beaumont, Texas. Does anyone have any experience with Blackboard Collaborate? Students are not understanding how to use it.
Sorry, I have some experience. I didn't understand how to use it. So the fact that students are now just like, oh, it's not just me. All right, Roscoe.
We got rid of it. That's all I can say.
There we go. All right. I was like, yeah, okay. All right. Next question.
Theo Ziotus is in with, I read for alternate drivers for GeForce RTX that unlocking the restriction on concurrent sessions will be making the RTX similar to Quadro. Does that make sense to someone here?
I don't think it's something we've dealt with a lot there. Yeah, really fast, Jeffrey.
I thought that you did GTX. It was the GTX you had to unlock.
No,
So
sure.
that's my only. Yeah.
Okay. You're breaking up, Jeffrey. Next question.
Yeah, David C. Phillips of Wichita, Kansas. Hi, I'm new to lighting green screen. I know the basics, but my question is, do I flat light the screen or just focus on lighting the subject?
Go ahead, TJ.
Yes, both. You flat light your green screen so there's no shadow and it's even all the way across. And then separately, you light your subject.
Yeah, separate is the key. Go ahead, Chris, real fast.
Yeah, and if you can get your subject as far away from that green screen as possible, it'll work better.
Yeah, I would consider 3 to 4 feet minimum of what I consider acceptable, and then I shoot for 10 to 15 feet. Yeah, 10 to 15 feet is what I'm generally trying to get to. Next question.
Jim Wilkins of Marblehead, Massachusetts. Dante can live with other network traffic, but I've always kept it mostly separate. Should I use a second NIC on Zoom computers, or is it safe to put Dante on the main network?
Anyone? Go ahead, Mickey.
Sorry, still processing the question. Should I put these? Well, you can keep Dante on the same network as other traffic, but it would be safer if you segregate that to different VLAN.
Mm-hmm.
But if you have the opportunity to put it on a separate NIC, then I'd rather prefer that.
Last question, I think.
Yeah, last one. Peter Moore of Auckland, New Zealand's in with a quick question on Resolve training. Any dates for Bill WRT with regard to? Quick question with regard to the Resolve training.
The Resolve training is February 27th, March 6th, March 13th, and March 20th. So it's the 4 weeks, 1 hour each week, each Saturday with Mark and Steve from Ripple Training. And so they'll be doing 1 hour. We will be sending you out a coupon to get half off from Ripple Training on their Resolve training. So you'll be able to get basically their video. You can watch the videos, do the tutorials and so on and so forth, and then they'll be there to answer questions. And so that's where we'll all be doing Resolve training together. And then Nick Justishin, who was here a little while ago, we'll be starting some virtual production training in March as well. So things will get hectic. Real quickly, before we get to the top of the hour, we've got Ron Reed. Hey, Ron, good to see you here. We're going to do a real quick mic check for the new folks that just jumped in. So let's just go around the horn. Go ahead, Chris.
Is that Chris Clark?
That's Chris Clark.
Yep. This is Chris Clark. Happy to see you all this morning. Let me get my audio settings up and see how I'm coming across. Looking for the meter. There it is. A little low. Mickey, is that a little low?
You're coming in maybe just 2 or 3 dB hot, actually.
Okay.
Too high. Yeah. So just give us a small nudge
Okay,
down.
let me repeat some of that. Lovely day in Tempe, Arizona. How's that looking now?
Split the difference on that change, Chris.
Okay, just a little bit up. Thank you.
And we're going to do a pretty cursory and fast move through the mic checks here. So, Steve, go ahead.
Yeah, Steve Cotton here. It's a beautiful day. Wonderful discussions already for the last hour, and I'll be talking about this level, which is about 20.
Can someone let Emily in? Aaron?
Aaron Graham from Boston, where it's a balmy 12 degrees, and it'll be 6 later on this week, so a little chilly.
Yeah, go ahead. Laura?
Good morning. How are we doing? Looks like it needs to come up a little bit. This thing changes every single time.
It's pretty good. It's pretty good.
Okay,
Go ahead, Tony.
Thank you.
Good morning, office hours. Can
Coming
you
in a little
hear
hot,
me?
Tony. Yep, just coming in a little loud. Go ahead. We're just Emily.
Sorry, I was in the middle of changing my name and fixing my camera because it looks like it got stuck, but I will fix that in just a second. How am I sounding?
Sounds good. Sounds good. Cara?
Good.
Hello from Florida. Good to see everybody. Last
Yeah, good
week
to
we
see you
were
too.
kayaking, so we didn't make it. It looks like my levels are okay, or
Yep, looking good. Looking good. Maybe a little hotter, but you could turn them up just a little bit. Tony? Did you bring it down a little bit, Tony? Oh, are you there?
Yes, I brought it down. Is that
Okay,
any
yep,
better?
sounds good. Sounds good. Absolutely. All right. So we're going to go ahead and get started here. If we can go ahead, and if you're an educator, you can go ahead and raise your hand. But we're going to go ahead and keep moving here. We're here. We have been. We're very fortunate to have Ron Reed from South by Southwest EDU here, and Ron is going to talk a little bit about South by Southwest's approach. If you've got questions for Ron, so as we start to talk, if you've got questions, go ahead and throw them into Makana, and we'll Ron, we'll throw them to Ron and see what he has to say about whatever you're asking about. So Ron, can you tell us a little bit about what the commitment is of South by Southwest EDU?
Yeah, first of all, Alex, it's great to be here. I enjoyed the earlier program with my colleague Hugh Forrest. He set a pretty high hurdle, so I'll hope I'm able to clear it. I've enjoyed the conversation leading up to this discussion as well. Yeah, I'm really excited with South by Southwest EDU. I started the event a little over 10 years ago now. As you know, the story of South by has really been sort of one of expansion, beginning first as a music festival, then it evolved into including music and interactive technologies. You know, as I looked at like the power of that convening to sort of interdisciplinary connection across different sectors, I was taken with the prospects and possibilities for education. I had a career in education publishing, ed tech, sales, and such. And it always seemed to me that in education, there are these huge chasms between the K through 12 world and higher ed, and between higher ed and the world of work. And it was a sense that if we could do the same thing that Hugh and the company had done for music, film, and interactivity in terms of just creating a convergence zone, that education might benefit from it as well. So I'm really proud of it. It's been probably the fastest growing component of South by Southwest for the last 10 years. As we approached last March, we were teeing up our 10th anniversary, and we're super, super excited about it. As far as education conferences go, it's evolved to being one of the larger ones in the country, and I'm really proud of it. I think there's a great energy associated with it, in no small part because of the brand affinity for South by Southwest, celebrating creativity and innovation.
How do you structure it? Like, what are you looking for as you kind of build it out?
Yeah, it's a really a fair question, and it's been a little bit of an evolution. So again, maybe from the inception, it was sort of like, how do we create a connected community across all the sectors in education the same way South by has done for their principal verticals? And so at a few levels that we looked at, again, intentionally, how do we connect our community of K-12 educators and higher ed and so forth? And we've seen that really expand a lot. And now we kind of focus on the whole learning life cycle, from early learning all the way to, to career and professional development opportunities. And so we see education as a really big foundation for those conversations that we support. So the community we convene to kind of describe and define a little bit, probably about a third of our community are from the K-12 space, and that would be the principals and teachers and superintendents and such that we all know. Probably another third of the community is higher ed, presidents and provosts and professors in that sector. So first of all, I'm really happy to have both those communities together. And then probably the other third, I would say, is a combination of startups and legacy companies in education, increasingly digital, as you'd appreciate. And we've also seen a big growth of foundations and nonprofits who see and invest a lot in advocacy and trying to advance teaching and learning for the sector.
Over the last 10 years, what have you seen as kind of the trends? How have you seen it adjust and change over the last decade?
Yeah, I think maybe a couple points on it. I think, first of all, when we first launched the event, high stakes testing, as an example, was sort of a big push. And where I'm at in Austin, Texas, has been fairly prominent. No Child Left Behind, and a focus on measurement and sort of the data collection in terms of how students are progressing through that. And so I think there was a lot of energy focused on the measures and metrics of the system. At the higher ed level, it had to do with inputs and students entering college. I think in the last decade, we've seen a real shift away from sort of those, or at least my observation would be a shift away from those institutional measures to really focusing more on the learner and what the learner's needs are. So I think there's a much more learner at the center of the conversation about education, as opposed to the metrics and measures of the institutional landscape, would be my quick observation about it.
How much crossover do you feel when we look at the technologies and so on and so forth between all those, let's say the three regions that you're talking about, between K through 12? And we're actually very similar to what you're talking about, which is what the educators that entered here come from, that right before you came on, come from K through 12, higher learning, and executive or institutional learning as well. So we kind of represent that. So it's interesting that we try to keep it together. But how do you see those? Are there things that pull them all together?
Yeah, I think so. First of all, I think as we began, we were really supporting content from each of those audiences and sort of assembling them. And so there was a lot of K-12 content initially. That's more my background, frankly, than higher education with it. And then in doing that programming, grew that community. And then we sort of moved on and leaned into higher education and really trying to support those conversations to draw that community. And we functionally, through programming, have done very similar strategies to engage startups and foundations. I think as we got into year 3, 4, 5, it was sort of intentional about what are these intersections of these communities, rather than having a flying wedge of interest to one sector across our event. How do we intentionally mix that up a little bit more? I think we've been aided a lot in that by, again, this sort of focus on the learner, which maybe is not as restricted as sort of our institutional constructs of, be it K through 12 or higher ed. So we're seeing a big growth right now, for example, in the whole world of work and reskilling. I think one of the sessions we'll host this year that I'm looking forward to are 3 university presidents, one from an HBCU, Paula Blanc from Southern New Hampshire, who's done spectacular work in this regard, and another university president talking about, again, sort of their shifting demographics and the focus on that world of work and reskilling and skill set aligned to career above and beyond some of the more fundamental work we've done.
Absolutely. I think we've got a lot of questions now stacking up from the audience. And so we'll, Bill, what do we got?
We start with Maggie Barton-Baird of Edmonton, Canada. Here, South by Southwest chose SwapGuard as their conference platform. Can you explain how it was selected and why it was selected?
Yeah, with respect, I'm really unable to. Again, at EDU, I sit on sort of the creative. South by Southwest is organized into a number of groups. I actually reside with Hugh in the programming group, and so I report up to Hugh. We've got a pretty impressive technology group who is running all of that out. And I know we've been doing a bunch of staff testing on those platforms, but I think they are still in process and making a lot of adjustments on it. And so I'm not at liberty to share at this point, but we're excited to be launching it in short order. So I think it'll be fairly apparent at that point.
That's great. Next question.
Chris Clark from the panel here, impressed that Ron has persisted for 10 years. What did it take to keep it going for so long?
No, that is so funny. First of all, maybe to step back for a sec, I got involved with South by because the guy that started South by, or one of the founders, was my best friend growing up in high school. He and I went to Reagan High School down the road here in Austin, Texas. And so again, I had a career in education technology, curriculum development of a couple startups, while Roland was busy with Hugh and others building out music, film, and interactive. I think Roland maybe imagined that I was starting a track at Interactive, and indeed that's how it initially began. We're doing some pilot sessions 1 year at the Interactive Conference. In fact, we focused on MOOCs at higher ed and digital learning, open source content for those first sessions. And there was such a good response to it that we really leaned into it. So I think there's been a long-term commitment to it. And I personally believe that education is increasingly appreciated as foundational to sort of all of the work that happens at South by, be it in the music, in the film, in the tech environments, that there is a sort of an appreciation for education as sort of a foundational conversation that is germane to each of those sectors. And so I think a growing commitment from South by Southwest. And I think it's, again, representative of just sort of the attention to learning, informal and lifelong learning above and beyond sort of the structures and systems that we initially focused on in launching the event.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think that professional development is going to be something that people have to, I mean, one of the issues is that we're accelerating in how fast the world is moving, information wise, so what you could do, nothing would change for hundreds of years, 1,000 years ago, right? The
Right.
technology would move very slowly, and now it's different, every 6 months, it feels like, that you have to know a couple new things. It's not going to be something you can get a job and just do, right?
Yeah, it's really interesting. And I think about, I'm an old guy. I've got 2 sons who are now out of college and into careers. And I look back on sort of their college decisions, and I think I would counsel them differently. What I love most, one of the things I love most about my sons is they're very engaged learners, and what they attack, they look for proficiency in, and they source that support through all manner of channels outside of what we might define as education on it. Now, I think they really represent, again, sort of the new age of learning, in which it is everywhere all the time, and it is through informal and personal channels as much as it is through grander structures.
Yeah, absolutely. We're the epitome of informal structures.
Well,
so
I have to share, Alex, honestly, as I was listening to the conversation before, you've done a really masterful job of building community at office hours. I really love the conversations that I was listening to before coming on, and I think this was really, I think, foundational to our thoughts about EDU, and it was fueled by Hugh Forrest, and it's really been a community building effort trying to support the needs of that community. And I love that it's such a rich community, and it's evolving so much at South by EDU. But frankly, you're a great model of building community with intent and purpose.
Well, thank you. I feel like at this point I'm just part of the community. I kind of try to do the best I can to keep it going in some certain direction, or try to keep feeding it. But it's like a sourdough starter that once it takes over, it kind of has a life of its own in this community. I've just been very fortunate that so many great people have been attracted to it. So we it keeps building, and every day is different. We have a different set of people, and I get up every day to hang out with them.
That's
so
awesome.
It's great.
Yeah, I often clarify that I feel more like a community organizer than an event planner. We're really thinking about what are the needs of the community, how can we help them achieve that, and so it's a lot of fun. I'm enjoying it.
Absolutely. Next question.
Longtime panelist Emily Russo from Red Hook, New York says, how do you balance the vendor and classroom innovators? I hate getting misled into a sales pitch.
Yeah, I understand, and I kind of learned firsthand in year 2. I think we got really upside down as we were beginning to grow. I think year 1 we had maybe 800 attendees at the first South by Southwest EDU. Year 2, I think we grew to 2,000. And it was clear that we're going to have to put some greater controls in. There were a lot of presentations that the community shared felt more like pitches than that. And to that end, we've done a few things. One, we've grown a pretty significant advisory board who helps us review all of that content that comes in through Panel Picker, which I know Hugh spent some time discussing as we sort of crowdsourced the program. A lot of folks think that it's sort of a popularity contest, but while we crowdsource from the community and the community can vote on the ideas they like, we have a fairly robust advisory board who helps us screen that content and functionally helps make recommendations as to what ultimately gets on the program. So I think, first of all, we've become a little bit more savvy about that. Having said that, we also appreciate sponsors who help us provide a complete experience at South by EDU that we wouldn't really be able to do in the absence of their support. So we restrict sponsored content to less than 10% of our program, and we disclose that it is hosted by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation or whomever the alignment might be on it, to try to be again forthright and disclosing of that. You know, we're not always successful. I'm the first to admit, and those are painful moments for us when we realize that we've strayed on that. But we've really sort of elevated our filters and tried to provide values for sponsors on the same token that help clarify the editorial interests that are involved. And the final thing I'll say is, in many ways, South by is ultimately all sort of a pitch fest. Like, educators are advocating for approaches and for innovative tools and strategies. They're sharing best practices. Startups are pitching their ideas. And so I think there is some energy that comes out of that, but clearly that's tension between commercial and the public nature of interest is something that I'm highly sensitive to, and we hope we've improved over the course of our tenure and being better at that.
Next question.
From Laura Thompson, our friend here in the panel from Beaumont, Texas, and I'm going to face a whole bunch of initialisms that I'm not familiar with, so I'm just going to do them as acronyms and hope I get it right. Have you approached some of the higher education, NACADA, NASPA, AHEAD, and others? What would you be interested in reaching to some of those groups?
Yeah, first of all, thank you for the question, and it's a really interesting one, and I'll try not to run too far astray from it, but there are so many organizations in education, and they have very crisp focuses for their member communities. It was one reason why I think South by EDU is sort of not a membership organization, has really grown and been able to kind of create a big tent of perspectives. Certainly that's been our desire. To that end, we do a lot of work with membership orgs and associations to help support them in their membership work, inviting them to engage and contribute and participate at South by Southwest EDU. A couple of those organizations that come to mind, we do a lot of work with EduCause, which is focused on the higher ed CTO kind of role. And it's just one example of a number of membership orgs that we partner with. In fact, we in the past have had association partners, the same way we have media partners and sponsors that we recognize in that. I see it as maybe a win-win in our best days. Again, for membership organizations, it gives them exposure to a community that's broader than their membership as they seek to grow membership and relevance on it. Then on the same token, it helps me provide an introduction to South by Southwest EDU to organizations like EduCause and Online Learning Consortium and a number of those. So I appreciate the question. And I think, again, it was striking to me when I was in K-12, there are conferences and membership associations that are super granular for reading teachers and science teachers and elementary principals and urban superintendents and state commissioners. And I think the same thing rolls in higher ed as well. We saw it as a means of trying to provide a platform to pull all those folks together. And so we look at those organizations as partners more so than as any kind of competitor or something along those lines.
Yeah, I mean, I think that for us, one of the big things that we see is the heterogeneous mixture of our group, that we have people, there's a couple centuries of experience here, but it's all in different places. You know, some are heavy video and some are education, some are audio, some are streaming. And that place to mix is where we're learning from each other. You know, we're leveraging all of those things together. So we're definitely on the same vein.
You know, one of the things that Hugh spoke about is, again, just sort of the serendipity of connections given the gathering that is South by Southwest. And I feel that that's something that we've been really fortunate and successful at. I think there's an energy, there's an optimism about the community that is fun. But again, when you sort of mash up these different perspectives, some really fun collisions occur and new learnings result. And that felt to me like at a very fundamental level, part of the DNA of the South by experience that we're excited to try to apply in the ed sector.
It's been hard, you know. I've spoken at South by Southwest a couple times or been part of panels, you know, a couple times. And I realized after a couple that I had to shift gears and be more conversational. And what I mean by that is that when I speak at a lot of conferences, and when I speak at them, I'm in the speaker room, and then I speak, and then I go to a couple events, and then I leave. And I'm totally separated from the whole thing, other than the process. And with South by is probably the only place that I mingle. Like I try to find places to go to just talk to people, because there's just a lot of interesting people. I think that it's a different flavor than a lot of other conferences that I go to. So I think that's an interesting mix. The only other place I haven't spoken at, but that I talk to people as much is probably TED.
Yeah, I think that, again, that's one of the great, in our perspective, one of the great values of the South by experience are those things that we're not responsible for. I mean, that we just convene the community and they find a rhythm and an energy unto their own with it. I think in a lot of ways, Austin is a big star of the show in that respect. I mean, it's a city that lends itself well. They're great venues and restaurants, and they're in close proximity to the convention center. And there's a concentration of energy there that is really unmistakable. It's been certainly one of the things that we think a lot about as we virtualize the experience this year, is that how can we, and to the extent we are able, really support that in the context of an online engagement. And I think it's one of the greater challenges for us, that in part because it comes so naturally and easily to the in-person experience, in large part because of the city and just the nature of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Next question.
Another one from Emily from Red Hook. Post-COVID, will you keep the virtual conference option so geo-challenged teachers can attend? And she notes our districts also won't let us go in the middle of March, and has a frowny face attached to that.
Yeah, I understand. It's so interesting, Emily. Again, our dates are aligned to South by. South by evolved as a function of spring break, when everybody was out of the city as an opportunity to host the event, and it's certainly changed a lot since then. Yeah, my answer is yes. I think that's inevitable, and certainly I hope so as well. I think as the organization experiences this first sort of online convening this March, there will be a lot of learnings for us in the go forward. But I think especially for South by Southwest EDU and the educators we serve, it is part of the DNA that will be enduring beyond the pandemic. And so while I anticipate there will always be, and it will always enjoy the physical gathering in March, I certainly anticipate richer interactivity throughout the year, powered by digital gatherings and virtual connections like this as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think that the big thing that we always try to push against with streaming, I mean, that's what I do as a business, is streaming other people's events, is that it was hard to not have the just a camera in the back of the room, right? Like that's all you'd get is a camera, maybe a couple cameras in the back of the room. And the online experience, or even the recorded experience, is pretty bad, and I think that we now, as we move in, it just feels like we're never going to be able to go back to that, where that's going to be okay, which is great
Yeah,
from my perspective.
I would agree. I would agree.
It has to be more engaging, than that.
Well, and again, it's one of the things I'm appreciating as I, participate today and see your community, is that physical gathering in March is sort of the go-to, where, South by will have 50,000 plus folks, registered and participating. EDU, again, as a conference has grown as large as 10, 15,000 in attendance in that respect. And so loving as much as we do that experience and the benefit it brings to the city that we love as well on it, I think more intimate connections and more focused connections are really, really powerful opportunities for us to continue to grow and support the community in new ways. So I'm really excited about that.
Yeah, I mean, for us, we do this every day, 7 days a week. And the funny thing is, we realized at some point, we just celebrated our 300th episode since COVID started. And I've spent more time with the folks here than I've spent with anyone other than my family at this point. And so now, and what it has created is kind of an acceleration. Like, you get to see, if you did this 300 times, this is what it would look like, rather than, and so I think that what we see though is that informalness that we have only once a year at a conference, can be created over, because it's a mixture. It's this interplay between what we do here, but we also have Discord, and then we have, lots of, other meetings and so on and so forth that happen, every day. And so that intermingling has created a community that I feel like is tighter than most of the communities that I've seen in the physical world, and it's global.
Certainly for years, I've thought about the March convening, and kind of one of the strategy filters I push things through are like, does this add value to that March convening? And I think a part of our experience, and maybe the broader experience of the education community who is doing so much online at this point, is that, yeah, these can be terribly additive and help create greater value for the community at large. So I'm excited about what the future can hold for us in that respect.
Absolutely. Next question.
Andrew Warwick's in with, do you have any expansion plans that you can publicly talk about?
I don't have any that I can't talk about, but I think honestly, as I approach it, I'm really proud of the trajectory of growth that has been South by Southwest EDU. I mentioned 800 to 2,000, and then we went from 2,000 to 4,000 and 4,000 to 5,000. And so growth, again, I'm a liberal arts guy, kind of a startup guy in the publishing thing. I've always imagined growth to be, if you're not growing, you're dying with it. And so it's always been sort of a focus point for me. So I'm not sitting here with great and specific plans for growth other than what we're talking about. I think layering in interactive virtual components, be they events or just gatherings of our community, will ultimately add value to March and help us continue to grow. And that is, fundamentally my aspiration. How do we get to be the biggest learning festival that really elevates education, really celebrates teachers like rock stars, and sort of propels education even further into the national discourse? I have to say the pandemic has done a lot for that in terms of helping folks understand the value of our educators, the challenges that they face. And when I first started South by EDU, again, that catchphrase of celebrating educators like rock stars, we felt like there was a creativity and an artistic element of education that was as resonant as the folks we celebrated as rock and rollers or new media inventors or film producers. And so we feel like that is of service to such a critical community, and one that is too often not supported as aggressively as we think they should be, or celebrated for their good accomplishments.
Good. Next question.
Roscoe Jones is interested in your organization's relationship with CEU, Continuing Education Unit classes.
Yeah, it's interesting. Again, as a component that really celebrates learning and supports educators, we've endeavored to lean into that. And it's not been without its challenges in some respects, but first of all, South by Southwest has been doing this for quite some time in regards to the legal profession and continuing ed credits on the program that Hugh and the conference team produce. There's equal interest and probably greater appetite at EDU, at South by EDU for that. So we have worked with a couple of partners. One locally for us is the Association of Texas Professional Educators. We provide them the session descriptions for the program, and they evaluate them and will assess whether they are applicable for continuing education credits. And that is germane to a lot of our community who are locally from Texas. Probably, I don't know, 25, 30% of our community are Texas specific. And so it's a value to them. And I think, our challenge though, is that those continuing education credits are frequently in the K-12 sector, at least, managed on a state by state basis. And so my ability to scale that is a little bit challenging at this point. Earlier in this morning's conversation, there was discussion of different organizations that are doing credentialing and other things, and we have an interest in how to do that to better support our community. We see, I have to share, and I appreciate so many folks from Texas or our panelists and involved. You know, South by casts a big shadow in this state, and a lot of school superintendents and university professors think it's a party. And why am I underwriting? You're attending a festival in Austin called South by Southwest EDU. And so continuing education credits is a way for us to underscore sort of the professional development, design, and value of the experience in really helping folks further their career. And I think that is, again, more broadly of interest as we look at, again, informal accomplishments and chronicling and credentialing that across all sectors, but it certainly resonates deeply with our education community at South by.
Next question.
Ron Hoot of West Michigan says, how might you describe who South by Southwest EDU is targeting versus ISTE, TCEA, or FETC conferences?
Yeah, great question. For many years and still, I attend all those events. ISTE is the International Society for Tech and Education. FETC, Florida Educational Technology Conference, was its roots. I think it's now the Future of Education, it is the new acronym for that. I think that, again, I'm really proud of how South by EDU has evolved. And I think while we welcome and do a lot of work to support what happens in the classroom and on the campus, we see an opportunity to lean into learning that is a little broader than those. So I think, first of all, many of those organizations, and again, I'm good friends with the people that host them, they're association partners, and we love their work. They are membership orgs often, and they are focused on sort of ed tech in the classroom, technology coordinators at the building, district level. And we love those people, and we welcome them to EDU. But I think we are trying to look at a little broader intersection of where culture meets learning, and sort of consistent with some of maybe our earlier conversations about lifelong learning is defined a bit by institutional approaches, but is increasingly richer than that. And so as a brand and as a community, we surely welcome all of the folks that attend those events. But as a couple of examples, at South by Southwest EDU, when we talk about education, there's a lot of discussion about equitable access to that. And so equity and justice of education is a topic that I feel is vibrant at South by EDU. That's maybe not the priority focus for some of the more tech-oriented conversations. But I say again, Richard Kulata, who runs the ISTE organization, and I are good friends, have great respect for his work, and they're an association partner we try to hold up at South by EDU, even as we try to broaden the conversation beyond just the tech context to really this, again, intersection of culture and learning. And, you know, as an example, pardon me, I'll drone on for just a minute longer.
Please do. Plenty of time.
I'm on a foundation. I'm on a board for the foundation that supports the public school system here in Austin, Austin ISD. It's called the Ed Fund, Austin Ed Fund. Given the pandemic, we leaned in and were rewarded with a lot of support from the community in this moment to help our local educators and students. Couple of examples. I think we've collected more than $4 million from the community, from small individuals to corporate folks. And some of the things that we were initially addressing were, how do we get hotspots set up? Who needs tablets? I think we were all a little surprised, believing that everyone had internet access to learn. No, that's not really the case. And of course, we should have known better on that. So we got buses with hotspots parked around the city to support that. We began supporting not only, sort of digital learning tools and access, but there's a whole mental health component associated with schools being opened and closed. I just was reading stories about Clark County and Las Vegas, where in a virtualized world, the number of student suicides is just shocking. And so we are familiar with that. And more broadly, have begun, have distributed over 1 million meals since the pandemic to learners and their caretakers. And so at South by EDU, we again, I didn't maybe initially think about food services and food insecurity as foundational to our launch of South by EDU. But I think they're just representative of the types of issues that increasingly we recognize educators are burdened by, and which merit attention and dialogue and support in that respect. So proud of the local work in Austin, but that's going on all over the country. But I think we are realizing there are relevance and connections to public education and education more broadly that go far beyond the nits and gnats of curriculum context and mastery, and really have to do with life. And so, forgive me, I may have wandered astray a little bit from the topic, but again, we see ourselves in a pretty rich conversation about learning in all its facets, and feel like, again, that's kind of true to the brand and the spirit of what we hope to do at South by EDU.
Yeah, I think that figuring out the cultural end of things is complex. I look at just my kids. I'm learning to say oof and yeet are the new language that I have that I'm slowly picking up from my kids, and being taught what a short oof is versus a long oof is two entirely different things, evidently. But when I look at how they learn, they there's so much of it since YouTube, like that, my daughter learned a new song on the bass for her music for music in school. And the teacher asked, where did you learn that? Do you have a teacher? Just watch it on YouTube. There was how to do this, and figuring out ways to integrate. A lot of times that's moving faster than the structure, and so I think that it's valuable, whether we're doing it here or South by Southwest, of how do you incorporate some of those things into the structure that we have there. So
yeah, it's interesting, Alex. I'll share that when we first started South by EDU, I was concerned in that I didn't want EDU to be sort of the overflow for South by Southwest, and so it was intentional that we sort of created separate events, different registrations, friendlier price points for educators than the main fest perhaps might be, and so. Forgive me, I'm losing my train of thought as to where I was running with on that conversation. But I think that, again, I'll go to a foundational point, forgetting really where I was marching towards with such enthusiasm that, again, we see it as sort of foundational to all the work that goes on at South by in all those sectors.
Yeah. Next question.
Steve Cotton from here in the panel in the San Francisco Bay Area says, what has been your favorite or a crowd favorite EDU session so far?
Oh, man, I love that question. Thank you so much. Again, Hugh gets to bring out all the heavy artillery in terms of celebrity and prominent voice and whatnot. And so I tend to look at things a little differently. I mean, we certainly love celebrity at EDU, but it more in connection to initiatives that are central and foundational to our community. So a couple of them, there was a great conversation. I so appreciated your panelists' insight on MOOCs and content management. It's not a real proficiency of mine. Although year two, one of the programming highlights, year two was a solid year for us as I think about it. This was a conversation. It was the year of the MOOC in 2012. I think the New York Times proclaimed it. And I had the good fortune of having Anant Agarwal, who's the founder of edX, the nonprofit partnership between Harvard and MIT. Had Andrew Ning, one of the co-founders of Coursera, who had stood up a for-profit initiative, and we hosted them, and in fact had a New York Times reporter moderate that conversation. And I was really enthused that it was, again, a little bit nerdy, but I thought in the moment highly relevant and forward-leaning on it. The next year, I'll share, I was super excited, and Hugh may have been a bit chagrined. We were fortunate to host Bill Gates in a conversation. Bill and the foundation have done a lot of investments in ed startups, advocates for technology and personalized learning and equitable solutions on it. To meet Bill Gates and have a conversation in the green room was awesome. He came out and did a solo presentation for a little bit, and then invited several startups that they were working with to come join him on stage, and so really helped drive that conversation forward for us. Another little highlight of mine I'm fond of sharing has to do with Goldie Hawn. Goldie, we all know as an Academy Award winning actress and someone who charmed me when I was very young and Lafayette. And so I've always been, attracted and a fan. And so to understand that she has had a foundation for many, many decades, or I should say many, many decades, for many years, addressing mindfulness was a really fun experience. She had been working with the University of Central Florida on a collection of avatars that would permit students to unburden themselves more easily than in a real world conversation. And so with the help of her tech team at Central Florida, she was on stage joined by several avatars who had been working with students. And again, mindfulness as an example, the whole social and emotional construct and support for our students is a much more prominent conversation today than when we began, and an appreciation that certainly above and beyond the academic goals that we have for students, there is a whole child and a whole learner to be supported. And Goldie Hawn really helped us very early sort of make that come to life. A bunch of other speakers that quickly come to mind. I was totally charmed and enamored with Temple Grandin, who came and talked about it's just spectacular. And in fact, I knowing her love for great cowboy shirts, I got her one for joining us.
Great.
But again, as much as I love her message about different kinds of minds learn in different kinds of ways was just really profound, and helped us support a community who thinks a lot about accessibility and how to support unique learners and with difficult challenges on it. I could perhaps drone on a little bit more, but those are certainly a few of the highlights that come to my mind anyway.
That's great. I fell into the Temple Grandin, the documentary, or not the documentary, but the movie. And just fell into it one night in a hotel and just was completely enamored. I mean, completely just caught up in it, and just didn't know who she was until then. Until that movie came out, and just amazing mind. To think through that stuff. As someone who grew up on a cattle farm, I was like a lot of that would have been useful when I grew up. Anyways. So anyway, next question.
And Roscoe Jones is in with perhaps the most pragmatic of today. Did you sell out on the $89 passes for 2021?
Pardon me. Yes, I'm happy to share that we did. And there was a modest increase, and we are sort of observing those numbers as well. Again, I'm largely in deference to South by and broader metrics associated with the main event, if you will. But yeah, we're attentive and are excited with the good response to the online program at this point, and are looking forward and excited to see people this March.
I really think that for a lot of organizations that were physical only or primarily physical, there's an opportunity to grow the audience using that as a base, a base of a core that kind of keeps it going, but leveraging the people that are connected to it that can't make it every year. And I think that business can be as big or bigger than the original physical expression.
Yeah, I think in two ways, perhaps. Hugh mentioned, again, we're bounded at our real life event in regards to international engagement. I mean, the time commitment, the expense, and the travel, et cetera. So we have seen growth in the international engagement on the event. Also, I think a lot about sort of accessibility for our key educator demographic and community as well. The earlier question noting that, spring breaks don't align. A lot of people can't be out of March. In many states, we're in conflict with high stakes testing that occurs, and other states are even prior to the pandemic are sort of restrictive of travel. And so I think that virtual affords us greater opportunities to support our key community of teachers and administrators and university professors, et cetera.
A lot of times when I'm talking to clients and designing events with them, I have to keep on reminding them that we're no longer constrained by time and space. People can be, like this panel today is, the panel in the audience here is in 4 or 5 different continents, having this conversation, and we do it every day because we can. We don't have to travel. We don't have to, it's the block that is the block. It's not all the stuff around it to get there. And so without, the constrictions of time and space, we can do a lot of really interesting things, so it's an exciting time.
Yeah, I'm excited at what South by can learn and how we can bring it to fruition. And I say again, taking good lessons from communities like yours, I think will be really helpful for us. But I think the opportunities are spectacular.
Yeah, absolutely. Next question.
Show friend Paul Wallace, who's been here on the panel since nearly the beginning, Austin, Texas, says, how do you replace the EDU showcase with all the exhibits? That is one of my favorite parts. He's one of his favorite parts of the event, being able to browse all the booths, talk to folks, and pick up swag. How do you handle swag remotely? Thanks for coming on, Ron. He notes.
Well, again, I appreciate the orange and white. I saw Paul rocking as well. I almost wore my UT gear, but I thought I'd go a little less descript on it. Yeah, first of all, before I got involved with South by, again, I was involved with publishing and product development and spent a lot of time in convention floors and trade shows. And I think it is, again, I'm excited to see how it evolves. Our business development team will have an online exposition. There's been good traction. In some ways, it opens up our vendor community to integrate experiences beyond the show floor, again, given the complements of virtual on it. As an old guy who has been to trade shows in the physical sense far too many times, I'm really interested to see how the virtual. I think like everything, there will be disappointments with some attributes that are different than the real life, but there will be new opportunities that are not available except for the virtual nature of the trade show. And in regards to swag, I know that the South by Conference is doing a digital swag opportunity for vendors in the trade show to contribute goods and such. We at EDU, I don't think embraced that very aggressively this year, wanting to see how it worked for our friends at the trade show for South by Southwest. But we will have an online experience for the exposition, and I'm excited to see how it evolves.
Yeah. Next question.
Laura Thompson from here in the panel, our friend from Beaumont, Texas. Does South by Southwest EDU have a track or a discussion on accessibility in education, particularly for this new experience of new education forms?
Yes, in a word, we do. Having said that, for years, we would organize everything on our program, as we still do, to a number of content tracks, and accessibility was actually have a couple of comments. If I make a quick note to myself, accessibility is one that we really wanted to lean into. We think that a lot of learnings that are applied to students with special needs have greater relevance and benefits to the whole learning population. English language learners, a number of supports that we do for English language learners are in fact impactful for all learners, as an example. So we really wanted to support and celebrate that. This year, as a part of the virtual experience, we've sort of tried to. One of the pleasures of online is sort of the potpourri, the cornucopia of goodness that is South by, with parties and mixers and sessions and talks and things. we've wanted to provide a little bit more cohesive and compact experience for educators who we know are dealing with life as much as they are online events and conferences. So we reduce the number of tracks that we have, but accessibility continues to be a trending topic at South by EDU. I think it's one that, again, fuels broader learnings, and we're excited with the richness of that content on this year's program as well.
Next question.
From panelist Cara Negri, are there programs to provide financial aid to people who wouldn't be able to participate typically, and how can people contribute to those programs?
What a lovely question, and I really appreciate it. Again, I think EDU is distinct from South by Southwest to make it more accessible to the community at large, and we are super attentive to our price points with that in mind. Having said that, we're working with a number of sponsors who had credit with us that they were unable to utilize last year with the cancellation of the event. And so we do have some scholarship opportunities on our website that are available for educators, for students who want to participate but are challenged with the registration fee. I think two of those organizations, I should recognize them. One of them is the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. I think the other is Houghton Mifflin Harcourt, HMH, is another one who said, here's some investment we had planned to devote to last year, that why don't you use it in support of educators. So in addition to that, we've had a needs-based scholarship for years, where at the beginning of the season, we've opened it up to folks to even at the physical event to extend some gratis registrations. We think a lot about education as this sort of tool of empowerment, and like our community, want that opportunity to be as widely available as possible. I mean, we are a for-profit and we do have costs associated with the experience, but we endeavor to be super attentive and supportive, recognizing not everyone has access to the event as much as we would like. I appreciate the question.
Excellent. Next question.
Paul's back. Paul from Austin, Texas. Are there any online preview events leading up to South by Southwest?
Great question, and I think the answer is yes. We're honestly, while South by EDU, our dates are March 9 through 11. We're planning on opening the online experience earlier. We were talking about the exposition as an example, and I want to say this is, I don't know, February 9th, 15th, a few weeks in advance of the event. The exposition will be open. Organizations have an opportunity to engage with attendees who opt in, to schedule appointments and that sort of thing. I know we're also working on both archival and fresh content, so that as folks join the environment, even prior to our programming for this year beginning, there'll be some engaging content and opportunities for them. So I think there will be an earlier preview opportunity to engage with the platform prior to the dates of the event beginning. And then I think even after the event, a number of those contents will, of course, depending upon permissioning and licensing, being available afterwards as well.
Have you thought about? I guess what are your thoughts around after the event of having just more events over the year, of just monthly events, quarterly events, weekly events?
Yeah, again, I think that's a model that works really well for EDU and our community. I think are familiar with, accustomed to that, and supportive of that. And while, again, in the past, our focus has been exclusively on March, I think Hugh alluded, and we're not quite sure what March of 22 will look like. Perhaps there's a bit more of a hybrid experience than an exclusively in-person on it. But I think the online elements of this, and when I was asked earlier about sort of growth strategies, I think it's unknown in terms of specifics. Like, I'm not able to reveal a monthly series or something like that we're doing. And and personally, my approach has always been to sort of toe dip and figure out what works, and then sprinkle some gasoline on a fire and light it up. So I think coming out of March, my personal desire and aspiration is to kind of experiment, given the learnings of the March occurrence, to see what opportunities exist and how we can align to really support, again, the community and sort of grow the experience beyond March. So on a personal level, I think the ed sector well aligns to that. As a part of a bigger machine with South by Southwest, of course, I think there are some reflections more broadly for the corporation as to how we proceed beyond March in terms of online experiences and how to stand them up. My hope and expectation is there might be a few different models trialed as we sort of arrive at some grander vision on that.
That's great. Next question.
And Sam Greenwood comes in with our last one from Toronto, Canada. Does the regular South by Southwest
I think what he meant to say, I think what he said meant was, does regular South by Southwest administer South by Southwest EDU? So are you part of the South by Southwest group?
Yeah, very much so. Again, I report into Hugh Forrest. South by EDU is a part of the South by property. And while we maintain, again, kind of a unique programming squad and focus and work on creative is sort of our area, we leverage all the back end. So the tech group that's standing up the virtual experiences is mirroring that work for EDU as it is for the main event. Our HR, our travel and volunteer and logistics group support us. The brand and messaging group again oversee both EDU and South by Southwest, and so happy to be part of the club. And often folks are unclear if it is distinct or, but no, part of the beast.
Right, Ron, thank you so much for joining us. It's just been such a pleasure to have you.
Listen, I've enjoyed it very much as well, Alex. Great community, and really appreciate being here. So thank you guys so much, and all y'all, I should say. That's the Texas vernacular. All y'all, thanks.
That's very good, and we can't wait. I think a lot of us will be. Maybe we'll bring you back on after March, after the dust settles a little bit, and get your. I'd love to get a postmortem from you if you're willing to come on again.
No, I would enjoy that. Again, we're all learning together on this, so it'd be a real treat. I appreciate it.
I think a lot of us are going to be at South by Southwest and South by Southwest EDUs, so we'll probably have a user experience from it and probably questions that derive from that. So it'll be a lot of fun.
I think that would be awesome. I would really enjoy that. I know Hugh would as well. So maybe we'll do a combined thing. That'd be perfect.
Yeah, that sounds great. All right.
Wonderful.
Thanks, Ron.
Thanks, y'all.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate it.
All right.
Have a great one.
All right. Take care.
Bye-bye.
And now we're going to switch over. We're going to start bringing people in. If you're here and you want to be part of the panel for Andy is going to be talking here in just a second. Andy Coluccio is going to be talking about Zoom OSC and how to supersize Zoom. So if you are interested in being part of that panel, go ahead and raise your digital hand and we'll bring you in to be part of that conversation. What we're going to do is we're going to stop here for a second and do mic checks. So do raise your hand right now. We will close that up in a couple minutes so that we can, for those of you who are new, I know a lot of you are new to the to our little gang here. It is required that you have your video on for the mic checks and for the show. So if you're in the panel, you do need to have your video on, audio muted unless you're talking, but video has to be on. You can't just be up here with a profile picture. We will remove you if you turn it off for very long. Some people get away with it a little bit here and there if I'm not paying attention, but generally we like to keep everybody with their cameras on. So if that doesn't work for you, then you can even just open up your mic and just let us know you want to be back to attendee if you've already jumped in, but just know that that's the case. And I can see a lot of excited folks jumping on here, so this is going to be a big panel. Another reminder for those of you who are new is just to remember that we raise our hands, for asking questions, and questions in general. Our request is to put him into Mukana. So actually use Mukana. There's a link in the chat, but use Mukana to at least initiate questions. If you're raising your hand during a point, it means that you want to build on that conversation, not that you want to ask a different question. So I just know I'm only repeating this just because I know that we've got a lot of new people here today, and we have kind of a way that we do stuff. so we'll kind of pull all of that together there. So we're going to basically go through and do mic checks here in just a second. I'm going to give everybody a couple more minutes to to jump in, and then we'll lock it. Now, I know that there was a lot of confusion. The confusion was all my fault. So for those of you who haven't trying to figure out what was what as far as the sessions, this general session is built on something we already do on Saturday, this first one. But what we're going to do is we'll have a separate session that we'll send out in the to the same email list. If you look at those agendas, by Monday we'll have the code up, and basically it'll be a different Zoom meeting for these starting next week, and that has to do with permissions requirements that are needed for Zoom OSC to operate. They won't work in this webinar. So for an overview, it works fine. For otherwise, it won't work as well. So anyway, so we'll be doing that as we bring people in. Another quick reminder: we'll send out another note tomorrow that's outside of the agendas that our first Monday meeting, Monday night, will happen on Monday. So in February, we're going to try it. If you're interested in coming in the evenings, or if you're interested in coming whatever time of day it is for you in those locations, that is a new thing for us. We're going to try it. We're going to see if we reach critical mass. We are reaching critical mass very quickly with Zoom. We haven't had a panel this big. We haven't had a panel this big for a long time. So but remember, if you're on again, if you're just coming in, that what we're looking for is, make sure to raise your hand. Raising your hand means you want to build on the comment or question that we're dealing with, not that you're going to ask a new question. New questions all go into Makana, and please ask often, vote often, and we'll move them up. Now, Andy's going to probably do a little bit of preamble and kind of walk us through a bunch of things, and then after that we will we'll open it up to questions and go from there. So right now what we'll do is we're going to start with, I think Andy was the first one of this group that came in. And we'll start doing mic checks again. So what we're going to do is, for those of you who haven't done mic checks with us before, what we're going to ask you to do is basically describe your audio chain. That helps us de-exit. It helps other people see what you're using. And it also is just something for you to be conversational about. Now, what you're looking at up here in that mic check is we're trying to get to -24 on an average. I'm a little hot right now. But you're trying to get -24 as an average LUFS. This means that for those of you new to this means our conversations are a little easier to listen to. I have a strong opinion that Zoom fatigue is bad audio. So anyway, so we try to tighten that all up, and we'll kind of go to each one of you and just check that out. And I'm going to step away for about 15 minutes, and then Mickey will take over the thing. Yeah, go ahead, TJ, before we start.
There was 2 more people waiting to get in, and they're gone. Okay, never mind.
Okay, great. And we're gonna let people in for the next 2 minutes, and then after that, we're gonna lock the panel. So no more for the co-hosts that are on here. 2 more minutes. 9:05. Lock the panel. All right. Go ahead. And you can still watch and still ask questions if you're worried about it getting on the panel. You don't have to be on the panel. All right. Go ahead, Mickey. Take it away.
Great size panel today. Alex, what's the plan for YouTube?
We're gonna keep streaming. Keep it. Is that okay with you, Andy? Yeah. If Andy's good with it, we're just gonna.
Okay.
Keep it going.
I didn't know if you wanted to cut it off and start a new stream. Or something.
Why don't you? Yeah, let's cut it off. So we'll start it all up again. That way, people can just find a separate one, and we don't end up with a long clip. So go ahead and give it back to me.
Copy.
And I'll kill it. Oh, I guess I can. Can I kill it? No, I can't. You have to hand it back to me. Hand it back to me and do the mic checks, and I'll kill it, and then we'll start a new one there.